Okay, welcome to another Awakening conversation. Today it's with Catherine Rickwood, who has a PhD in consumer behaviour, which is basically revolved around saving for retirement and ageing, and a master's degree in commerce. And she's done a TEDx talk called Retirement is Redundant. So welcome, Catherine, to this conversation. And I brought you on here today because you really are a thought leader in this area. And I know you have a passionate interest, and it's kind of one thing then leads to the other. And we've had lots of good conversations in the past. So I thought it was a really good opportunity to bring you on and have this conversation so people start to open their mind about this subject. So maybe we can start with how you got interested in this and how you kind of went down this rabbit hole.
Thanks, Sara, and it's great to be here. And as you know, I love talking all things ageing. So how did I get here? After my PhD, which looked at what caused people to start saving for retirement, what was the driver, I became interested in more about retirement. What is retirement? Why do we retire? And how do we retire? And what does retirement look like? As a result of that, I became curious around ageing, because retirement is about getting older. So then I became curious around ageing. Well, how do we age? And actually, because I'm getting older, I want to know, how do we age well? So there started my journey, which I've been deeply involved with for quite a number of years now.
So did it start with like how your parents did it, or how did the interest sort of begin for you? Or was it more of the financial thing, that like the saving for retirement did it start?
It was the curiosity. I guess one of the things, as a result of doing a PhD is that, it's all based on a level of curiosity. It's all about asking a question and wanting to know more and wanting to understand something more. And you're at the edge of knowledge. And so what I wanted to do was understand more, basically, and it was just more being curious. And I guess to some extent it was a selfishness about, well, how do I age and how do I age well? Because if retirement is at 60 or 65 and we've got still quite a bit of life to live, how do I age and what have I got to do so that I can age really well?
So how did the retirement model first kind of start? Like, when did we start thinking that we were going to retire at 60 or 65 and start playing golf and doing other hobbies?
Well, the retirement age was first introduced in Germany at the end of the 1800s. Interestingly, the retirement age when it was introduced was 67 then. Average lifespans were at around 66. So there weren't that many people that actually got to retire and claim any form of pension. It actually was adjusted in the early 1900s when the concept of retirement started to be introduced elsewhere in the world, and it was introduced as 65 years of age. So, if you put that into an Australian context, if you retire at 65, average lifespans are 66, that gives you 12 months to hook up a caravan and travel around Australia. It's not long. And, on average then you'd be dying. Well, of course, over the years, our lifespans have become far longer than that, into our 80s. But, of course, the retirement age hasn't shifted. And because of the nature of retirement, where it's a time when you can move on from work and you can look forward to other things, that's what we now look forward to. This other whole life of freedom beyond work and doing what we want to do, and it's all our choice without having to be worried about getting up for work each day. So that's how retirement came about. Is it still relevant today when we're living into our 80s? I'd say no.
Well, I've heard that the Japanese don't even have a word for retirement. So their word is ikigai. So it's like they wake up and it's like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Or they're still living for their purpose or their what's the word? Can you
It's the reason for getting up in the morning. Ikigai about my reason for getting up in the morning. And the question is, when you do retire, what is your reason for getting up in the morning? And, if you're in pre-retirement and you sort of look at your day or your week or your month, if you're in your 50s and you're still working, even if that's part-time, you'll discover that a reasonable amount of your diary will have activity associated with work. You'll also come to realise that actually you get a reasonable amount of social engagement from work, that there'll be other activities around work that involves going out to dinner or having general chats with people. Now that's not there. You have a blank page diary. There's nothing to drive you to get up in the morning. It's whatever you want to choose to do for the day. How are you creating social connections? What are you going to be doing for the day? Now, it might be some gardening and it might be some voluntary work and it might be planning your next holiday, but what's really sort of driving you to get up and providing you with real purpose and meaning and stimulating you each day?
My great uncle died at 100 and stopped going to the office at, I think, 97 and stopped driving at 96. And every day he ate out. He was reasonably wealthy, so he could afford to do that, but he ate out in the same place. The waiters and waitresses knew him really well, took really good care of him, but every lunch he had a lunch date. And so he was always using his brain. He was always socialising. And, yeah, he had that really down pat. I think his quality of life, because of those things that he put into it, was really quite spectacular. So watching him do that was quite amazing and quite inspiring.
And some of us do have extraordinary, inspiring role models in our lives that motivate us to not only motivate us, but have us reevaluate what becoming older looks like. What does it mean, actually? Do I need to buy into the stereotypes? Do I need to have an ageist perspective about people older than me or even myself? Just because I can't find my car keys doesn't mean I'm now on the start of dementia or Alzheimer's. Just because I can't do the same level of physical exercise I could do when I was in my 20s, 30s or 40s doesn't mean I'm just too old and now in a state of physical decline. There's no question, and you as a chiropractor would know this, there's no question that our bodies change and adapt as we become older. I mean, we once used to crawl around on the floor when we were babies. Well, we stopped doing that and we started to walk.
It is different stages, right? It's just like it's an opportunity to do something different with your life in each of these stages rather than it being, well, I can't do that anymore, so it's the end of my life and the end of my purpose. Like, it's just so changeable and, yeah.
And it's adapting and, doing the sort of physical exercise that you enjoy that is still good and healthy for you. Well, that's a far better option than, I recall myself slogging it out in a gym to those aerobics classes with my leg warmers on. You won't find me there today.
So what type of exercise do you like doing today that's different to when you were younger?
So I love walking. We have some land, so I can be pretty physical on that land, digging holes and planting trees and, all sorts of land management. I also do yoga, but even the sort of yoga that I do now is quite different to the yoga I used to do. It's, the yoga I've historically done has been really vigorous and hardcore, and if I can work up a sweat, that's great. Well, I tend towards a more hatha yoga style, which is slower and gentler. I'm much more conscious of how I engage all of the right muscles in an exercise because I'm aware of the fact that if I don't do the right thing, I actually end up with a skeletal issue. Yeah. And, some of the challenges associated with some yogas is that they move so quickly. It's about the pace and doing the exercise And, I have more concerns about that. I like to have some weight-bearing exercise in there because I know that's really good for my bones, and to minimise and hopefully eliminate chances of osteoporosis. So that's the sort of thing I consider now. And meditation for me, part of my daily life.
Yeah. I mean, I was a gymnast when I was a teenager, but I can't do gymnastics anymore. But yoga is a really great option. And I'm a bit like you. I used to do the really vigorous yoga, and now I tend to, I still do like my vinyasa yoga, but I also really enjoy yin, which is before I was like, I'm not going to spend my hour of opportunity exercising doing yin when I could do vinyasa. But things just evolve and change. And I often say to my older kind of clients, to find, instead of comparing what you used to do and what you want to do now, it's like finding what you enjoy now as a fresh slate without any judgment around it. The other interesting thing around the retirement model is there's a really high statistic of death within 12 months after retirement. Do you have any idea what that is off the top of your head? I can't remember what it is, but I know it's like quite significant.
Well, no, I don't. But I also know that there are real challenges around a sense of being lost and potential loneliness, because people don't know what to do with themselves. I remember speaking with actually a financial advisor who had a client who, I think was reasonably well off, and he wanted to retire and just play golf. And so the advisor said, look, I tell you what, take the time off, take 3 months off, take long service leave or leave without pay or whatever it was, and you go and play all the golf you like and come back and talk to me. Don't resign, just do that. And this person came back apparently and said, I have to go back to work. 3 months of golf, as much golf as he liked.
Yeah, that's great advice. Because then they can
enough is enough. And I think one of the challenges for us is that as we move through our lives and head towards retirement, we really long for retirement because we're physically, mentally and emotionally exhausted, particularly if we've been in a physically demanding job or if we've been even in a white-collar job that's been physically, just mentally and emotionally demanding, or has had incredibly long hours, or we've been doing work that's kind of been okay but not really what we want to be doing. And so we just desperately want to be doing something else without real clarity about what lights our fire deep within that would inspire us to get involved with something new that still stimulates our brain and has us proactively involved with something, might have us going to TAFE or returning to university to reskill and perhaps work part-time, to think about what sort of business we might like to create for ourselves, to tap into the share economy. And I don't mean just, Uber and Airbnb or any of those sorts of platforms. There's a plethora of others. How we might get more involved in our hobby, for example, and learn more to become a trainer in that. There's a load of things, but we don't think about it because all we want to do is not do what we've been doing and have more freedom and choice in our life. Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is that's possible.
So how do you see that model then to make all that possible? Do you think like doing what that financial advisor advised, take some time off and explore some stuff if that's a possibility and then go back to work and go from there? Or what do you think, what kind of model do you think is good?
So I think this is really important because for some people, the traditional retirement is all they want and long for, and they're blissfully happy in that. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong, and I think that's really important. I don't think people can be wrong for their choices. All I'm suggesting is that there is another way of thinking about this that still gives you freedom and choice, but importantly, gives you other things in your life that can have a positive effect on your longer life being healthier for a greater period of time, and therefore minimise the extent of physical or cognitive decline, or perhaps to eliminate it altogether. So in terms of what that model looks like, again, I think that's different for everyone. What's important, I'd suggest, or a consideration in all of this, is that people do think about retirement. It's not a retirement, no more thinking to be done, I'm retired. Mm-hmm. Retirement is a considered decision, clearly from a financial perspective, but it's also a really important considered decision for our whole life. What does that look like? Who do we want to become? Who are we? And there's some really, there's some personal growth and personal development in that, and personal exploration in all of that. How does that occur? Well, it might start with some great travel, no question, and some conversations during that travel around what might life look like next. And, I wouldn't eliminate things like study. And yes, you could do University of the Third Age, but you can also go back to university. You could also go and, go to TAFE. And I know of people who have flipped from being in a corporate environment to becoming a teacher. And they may train to, with an education degree, or maybe they can take their profession and become a TAFE teacher. They might do something at a local community college. So I think there's lots of options. I guess the keys are what is it that you need to consider in order to age well? Purpose and meaning are essential. What are your social relationships? Where are they coming from? And who are they with? And I don't just mean with people your own ages. How are you getting those intergenerational relationships that naturally occur in a business environment, wherever you work, whether it's blue or white collar, wherever it may be? Because who wants to be the last person standing out of all their friends because you're all the same age and you just happen to live longer than everyone else? It kind of creates for a lonely life. And, whilst you may have a great relationship with your children and your grandchildren, is that the only relationship you want in later life? And what's the value of sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom with others anyway, beyond your immediate family? Where are you going to live, and how are you going to remain living where you want to live for the rest of your life? And considering things like physical and cognitive decline proactively is important. Do you want to be living on the third floor of a block of apartments that doesn't have a lift? Probably not. What is your physical exercise going to be? How is that going to occur? So these sorts of things are the types of things that certainly, when I run a community workshop, are the sorts of conversations that we have.
It's like just having a blank canvas for the next stage of your life and working out what you want to put on it. Can we just go back a little bit? In terms of like the workforce, has there been positive changes in the workforce in terms of employing older people because they're considered more knowledgeable, more skills, more wisdom, more commitment, any of that sort of stuff? Or is it still quite, I know it's a very common thought process that people, as they're getting older, the fear of not being able to get a job or not being employable, is that still as people think?
It's a valid fear.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say that there are employers that are shifting, but I would say that by and large, to be an older person, in fact, I know the Human Rights Commission has done a report that demonstrates and has evidence to show that it takes significantly longer for an older person to get a job than a younger person, simply because of their age. Mm. Now, I remember talking with a woman in a store recently, and we just started a conversation, and she said she was looking to return to the workforce. I said, oh, that's fantastic. And, chatted about what she wanted to do. She said, I'm still working on my CV. I said, oh. And she said, yeah, I've taken out 10 years from my CV, but I've got to take out another 10 So people actually doctor their CVs in order to take out years of experience just to get in the door.
Wow.
So she gets, but she said, the challenge is that I might get in the door, but when I'm in the door, the truth is revealed because they can see that I'm older. And there's, numerous stories of people who have done exactly the same thing, and then when they present into the room, of course, people can never discriminate on age and would never overtly state that, but they get a sense that it's an age-based decision.
Mm. Yeah, so we really need to, in terms of our whole population, what you talked about earlier is not have that negative ageist perception about older people, because really, I mean, they carry so much more wisdom and knowledge about life. I mean, we know that from our parents and our grandparents, and I find it weird that we don't appreciate and respect that in the actual workforce when there's so much contribution that can be had from older people.
And value that. And I guess there's two parts to ageism and stereotypes. One are the culturally held ones, and the other are the ones we hold for ourselves. So how do we limit ourselves in how we think about becoming older? How do we limit ourselves in what we think we can do? How do we limit ourselves in what we believe our choices to be? So how do we make judgments of others who are older than us? How do we make judgments of others around the choices they're making around becoming older? So I think it comes from both directions. I definitely believe that, at a cultural level, at a social level, at an organisational level, at a political level, all of the conversation around becoming older needs to shift. And I think we also need to shift what we believe to be true for ourselves. So long as we continue to desperately look to retirement as this nirvana holiday, and I think that's shifting, and we don't aspire to continue to make our own valuable contribution to the world in a way that we would like to do, we are contributing to limited possibilities.
That made me think of, like, every year when I sign up for my redo my chiro registration through the registration body, there's a question there that is like, how many more years do you estimate you're going to be in practice? Like, I'm 44 this year, so I'm like, probably like maybe 50, maybe 40, 50 more years. I mean, not in the same capacity, but, like, it'll evolve and change. But, and I think probably part of that is, maybe not culturally, but maybe from experience, because my great uncle was so amazing, and my grandmother was also so amazing and inspiring, and she died at 99. So both were just active people in the community. They had purpose, and they definitely adapted. Like, my grandmother aged so gracefully. She just moved into different phases just so easily and gracefully. It was like she made it look like it was nothing. So I find it interesting that people have other perceptions of aging, because I haven't actually experienced that so far. And
it's our self-belief, and some of it is challenging because we do feel like we're locked out. Some of it is challenging because we are all lumped together as this one amorphous mass that tends to get labelled with a sense of physical or cognitive decline. The possibilities can feel limiting when it's hard to get a job.
Excuse me.
Do you want to pay some attention?
That's okay. She'll just sit with me.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Because I'm talking to Catherine.
And some of it is, I think as we become older, we want to make a greater contribution to the world. Yeah. And the question is, how do we want to do that?
Yeah.
Do we want to do that socially?
I'm going to call this, Catherine. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I'm just going to pause it and pause it. Okay, recording.
There it is. So there are the mass perceptions of ageing, which is definitely prevalent through, the conversations we see through the media, through organisations, the challenges in getting a job, through the conversation at a political level, and that we all get lumped together in this one amorphous mass. And unfortunately, I think it may be starting to shift, but if surveys have the last tick box as 65 plus, it assumes that a 65-year-old is the same as an 85-year-old or a 75-year-old, which is the same as saying that a 15-year-old is the same as a 35-year-old or a 25-year-old is the same as a 45-year-old, and that there's no difference. And yet we know that the differences as we age are greater than when we're younger. So, there's just some really foundational aspects to what occurs in our culture that hasn't shifted. Retirement age is one, that we are allowed access to our pension at 65. I mean, this sort of thing's quite controversial because people resist, not being able to retire or get access to the pension until they're 67. Survey design is another one. And look, for people that have had really challenging, hard, cannot continue to do those things into your, later years. My brother's a builder and he hangs off the side of buildings doing building work. Well, is he going to be doing that in his 70s? Maybe not. But, are there other things that he could do that he's learned that he could pass on to others? Possibly. So it's a self-perception as well. What do we personally believe about ageing, and what do we personally want to aspire to? There's so many social issues that we can contribute to, whether it be the environment or any number of others.
Yeah, so it's basically, following your curiosities and being open and thinking about these stages as just different stages and different opportunities to do something different and contribute in a different way and have a more positive dialogue, self-dialogue and general dialogue about ageing generally.
In areas that interest you. Yeah. Because I think, as I said earlier, it's really important, I think, if we feel that retirement is just another part of slog, that's not going to be something we look forward to either. I mean, personally, as I say in my TEDx talk, the word, I think, retirement is redundant. So if we could think of it, it can be referred to as the third phase of our lives. We can be referred to as the silver generation. There's a whole lot of other things that, we can consider ourselves to be as we move through that. And I get that we don't necessarily want to do the same sort of slog. I had a woman in a workshop recently who had retired, and she knew she wanted to do something else and she wasn't sure what. And one of the things she really enjoyed doing was caring for others. So she thought she might go back and study a nursing degree, but was kind of feeling like that was just another whole thing and then whole career that she wasn't sure about. And, of course, as we worked our way through what her options might be, she started to get clarity around how she could have all sorts of different things in our lives. We have a gig economy where we can participate and have a portfolio career where our lives made up of all sorts of different things. And we have that flexibility and opportunity now in a way that historically we haven't. And that's thanks to technology. And we're an incredibly technology literate group of people between our 50s to 70s, and some of us older than that. Embrace it and use it. It's to our benefit. I mean, there's a whole stack of stuff available free online, or LinkedIn masterclasses can be really interesting if you want to take up photography and become a photographer, for example.
I actually know someone who's done that, gone from like a very corporate world to travelling and photography, and just unbelievable photographs, just so beautiful. Yeah, so it's finding those passions and those curiosities and the things of interest, and then just allowing yourself to go down that path in a positive way.
And remembering what our hobbies were. What is it that we used to do that we no longer we haven't had time for the last 20 years? Is that of interest now?
And even the bucket list, getting bucket lists together and just another family that I've worked with for a long time, they decided that they would put their house on Airbnb and just leave it open. All their kids had grown up. They kind of stayed occasionally, but put their house on Airbnb. And whenever it was booked, if it was booked for 2 weeks, they'd go down their bucket list and say, okay, where are we going to go for 2 weeks? And if it was booked for a weekend, it might be a little bit closer, but it would be like, okay, on our bucket list, where do we want to go for a weekend? It was just such a fantastic way to do it. Like, be open like that, and then it kind of pushes them onto their bucket list of where they want to go in the world. One time it was booked that someone wanted it for 3 months, so they went to Europe for 3 months and cycled around and did a whole heap of stuff. So, you can create these with great ideas, these great opportunities to, go down a different path and live a different life.
Well, and there's platforms for home exchange where you can actually exchange your home with someone else in the world for an extended period of time. Mm. You can list your home on a site so that it can be used for, an advertising shoot location or a film location. And, there's all sorts of things. So if you've got that happening in your home, what does that mean? And how does that feel? And what does that look like? And, just to really explore the wide range of opportunities that are available. To think beyond the stereotype.
And beyond what your life has been.
Believes something far greater. And that is one of the reasons that I continue to work in this place at the edge of knowledge, which is, the nature of having done a PhD, and kind of where I've explored this is at the very edge of knowledge, because I believe that individually and collectively we all have the opportunity to be far greater than the stereotypes would have us believe or imagine. And so that's our opportunity, to embrace the greatness that is within every single one of us, if we don't buy into the ageist stereotypical conversation around what it means to become older.
Mm. Well, that's a beautiful way and point to end this conversation. So thank you so much for talking with us. And would you mind just telling people where they can find you if they're interested in looking up stuff or getting in contact with you?
Sure. So people can email me, catherine.rickwood@threesistersgroup.com.au. I'm on LinkedIn, so certainly find me on LinkedIn. And I have a website, Three Sisters Group website, that has a whole range of blog articles on it and some resources that people might be interested in. And there's a YouTube channel. There's not a lot on it, but I did some subject matter expert interviews a number of years ago. They're only short 3-minute videos, so some people may be interested in that. And there's a few videos of me presenting at conferences, but a few clips. Videos, there's an old language. Who knows what a video is? I do. Let's say they're clips.
Well, thank you so much again for talking with me today, Catherine, and hopefully this has given people an opportunity to just think differently about their ageing future and have it as more of an opportunistic mindset rather than a limited, redundant retirement mindset. So thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
If you loved or learnt something in this episode, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. I look forward to bringing you next week's Awakening Conversation. Have a wonderful week.